Hello again. The lute player's world is rich and diverse. I've been playing the lute for a number of years, and in that time I've had the opportunity to play many different instruments all related to the Renaissance lute, such as the oud, the gittern, the medieval lute, the bandora, the sitan, chitarrone or theorbo, the English theorbo, the arch lute, the vihuela, the Baroque guitar, and the Renaissance guitar, but there is one instrument I've never managed to get my hands on, and that is the Baroque lute. And it's this instrument and its beautiful repertoire that we will be paying homage to in this episode. I've had the joy and delight of talking to William Crawford, a classical guitarist and third year studying at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. He will be performing for us a chaconne originally written for the Baroque lute by one of the most prolific and significant composers of lute music in history, Sylvius Leopold Weiss. Weiss was a German composer and lutenist who was born in 1687 and he died in Dresden in 1750. He was a master of the instrument, and it was thought that he developed the range of the lute by adding extra courses and deepening the lower range. He was also really good friends with J.S. Bach, and the two of them spent 4 weeks together in 1739. There's an eyewitness account of this that comes in the form of a letter written by J.E. Bach, and he says something extra fine in the way of music was going on. I wish I could have been there. The development of string technology in the 17th century, that of winding wire around gut to create an overspun string, led to new string lengths, and so lutes of 11, 12, 13 courses appeared, complete with a rider to hold those extra basses. These over-ringing bass strings created a new sonic sound world, utilised to capacity by Weiss and others. The chaconne, which Will is performing for us, is found in the London manuscript, one of two surviving manuscripts that contain the lute music of Sylvius Leopold Weiss. Will performs this work on the classical guitar. I'd also like to thank Nick St. George for his stunning photography accompanying this performance. Hi Will, nice to see you on the Priory Early Music series online.
Hi Liz, great to be here.
The piece you've recorded for us today is a chaconne by Sylvius Leopold Weiss, and it's from one of two manuscripts that contain his works. The London manuscript, which is a collection of works that is from around 1706 to 1730. It's a very beautiful manuscript now resting in the British Library. And this is a book of Baroque lute music. So, Will, how have you gone about adapting this rather tricky, elaborate music for the modern guitar?
Oh, well, that's a huge question. That isn't sort of, it's not really a overnight chore, really. It's sort of, mainly has been a journey of actually understanding the Baroque and the sound world and all the context, but also putting it in the context of the modern classical guitar. And I like to see it as a bit of a meeting both ends in the middle, because you don't want to play it as if you're playing a modern piece on the guitar, because it's not. You need to completely respect the original sound world and the performance context. But at the same time, you can't play it exactly as they played it, because for starters, you're on a completely different instrument. And I think there were two huge important factors with this chaconne, which I had to take into account. Now, the first was the fact that it was performed on the French Baroque lute.
Absolutely.
And obviously you've got the sort of standard lute setup with your courses, but then you also take this wonderful huge lute sound and place it onto a 6-stringed instrument is quite a challenge. The first, mainly because you actually, the edition I perform, I know some people do it differently, but the one I perform is actually arranged into A minor, mainly to make it playable mainly
Yeah.
because to avoid really harsh stretches with the left hand and to keep that
Also,
fluency.
if you're in the key of A minor on the guitar, you can utilize your open strings a little bit more. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. A minor definitely suits the classical guitar better than G minor does. And yeah, it just makes it more playable. But then also thinking about this sort of campanella effect that they would have used of overlapping strings and running into one another, and trying to get this general fluidity and leaving notes ringing on and letting it all merge into this huge sonorous sound world. And then the other thing, which I find the most interesting, is that the fact that when Weiss would have composed this chaconne, he would have had an idea of the bass line, this descending bass line you hear repeated throughout. But then for each time the bass line repeats, he would have improvised
Yeah.
over the top of this bass line. So I kind of like to think of it as a type of early jazz,
Yes.
because you've got this bass line, this constant bass line, but the original performance context, the audience and Weiss himself really wouldn't know what was coming up
No.
because it was a complete improvisation. So then you get these two really hard questions. You know, should I do some improvising as a musician on this piece of music,
Yeah.
or is that almost sacrilegious to go against the writings of Weiss?
That's a really interesting point, the point on improvisation, because we know for a fact that there's documentation that Weiss was a serious lute player, serious improviser, and that he and Bach had this amazing scene where they both sought out a fantasia and improvised upon a theme, and they could sort of make this polyphonic world happen in front of them, which for most people is just a mind-blowing concept to be able to do. But also one of the things I find about Weiss, which is really fascinating, is the fact that the music itself is just a guide, and that the interpretation of how you go about presenting that music is 50% of that composition that's down to the performer themselves. Would you agree with that?
I would and I wouldn't agree with that, because I would in the original performance context completely agree with that because it was this huge improvisation, but I wouldn't agree with that because um, I wouldn't be able to improvise in a Baroque style to the sort of value that the music desires.
Yeah.
I think I would, I'd give it a go, and I have done in the sort of, my own practice. But when it came to a performance or a concert like the piece I recorded for you, that is all down to following the music and what Weiss wrote.
Exactly. It's phenomenal, though, isn't it, to think that the traditional music practice was to be able to do that, isn't it? repertoire is not the only genre that you cover, and you have a guitar and harp duo, and called the Cherry Stone Duo. Can you tell us about the repertoire that you cover within this amazing ensemble, and how do you go about arranging for the guitar and the harp?
Oh, well, it's the amount of repertoire we cover is vast, actually. We've met, me and Emily, who is the harpist, we met in our first year at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, and it was my idea initially to start up the duo just because I was so fascinated by the harp. I'd never truly come across one before, and I didn't really understand it, and it just seemed so unique and appealing. But the problem with the individuality of the harp and guitar duo is that there is hardly any repertoire, compared to a string quartet or a piano trio. But the majority of our performance now is our own arrangements and compositions. And so I've done quite a few compositions for the two of us. And the way I go about them is mainly I write down a load of ideas. I sort of sit with my guitar and I sort of see the harp as this wonderful extension of the guitar, as well as its own entity as well. And so what I do is I get down all my ideas and then I take it to Emily and I say, right, let's have a go at playing this. And then she proceeds to tell me off for the next half an hour saying, I can't play what you've written. And then she makes it a lot better and improves it and sort of says, okay, well, instead of doing this chord which requires me to have 12 fingers, how about we take it down to this? And so it's a complete sort of conversation, a musical conversation between the two of us, and
I think
that's the composition side.
I think you have a good working relationship going there. I think that's very important.
No, absolutely, and yeah, it works really well, and it's the same with the arranging as well.
Well, I think you've come up with a wonderful combination, and you've got a CD out called Dance of the Mermaids, and for the audience, we've got a little extract of that here. And can you tell us a little bit about the project, the fundraising program that your duo is establishing? It's a charitable fundraising program called Music for the Trees. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
The idea was born from after the horrific events of the sheer volume and increase of forest fires through 2019. We felt a little bit useless sat in England watching these videos of like these ecosystems being completely destroyed and devastated. And so we were trying to figure out a way of how can musicians in Birmingham help forests in Brazil? And so that's where we came up with the idea, well, let's put on concerts and all the money we make from it, let's just send straight to WWF.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, we wish you all the best with that fundraising project. And if you want to know more about Will and Emily's CD and the Cherry Stone Duo and the fundraising project, Music for the Trees, his website address is coming up on the screen now. It's fantastic talking to you, Will, and thank you so much for your beautiful performance of the Chaconne, and we wish you all the best with the duo and all the arranging and composition. And next time I see you, maybe we'll have acquired a Baroque lute and we can share it. Next time I'll be chatting to Timothy Burton, a tenor and a first year studying at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. He and I will be putting together a lute song by John Dowland from his first book of song and airs of 1597. So, until next time.